All right, tonight we're in the book of Romance, is it? Something like that? Anybody remember? Oh, now when it comes to romance, these ladies know that one, don't they? Yeah, I know that. 13:6. 13:6. So, verse number 6, for this cause pay ye tribute also. So pay ye tribute also. For they are God's ministers, attending continue upon these very things. So here he tells us in 13:6 that you need to pay taxes. That's what tribute is. Pay your taxes also. So don't only give tithes, don't only take care of God's people, but take care of God's ministers also in the government. So the servants of the government are also, God takes care of them also as they take care of his people. Supposedly they're supposed to. Now you're always going to find that these governments get corrupt, but God always takes them out. He'll set them up and he'll move them and he'll remove them. So he does the whole thing. But he tells us here to go ahead and pay our tribute. Pay our tribute. In Matthew 22:21 it says, and what the question was asked here is whose picture's on that money? And they answered him and said Caesar's. And then what God said to him when they said Caesar's, he said, then say he unto them, render therefore unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God. So he's telling them, yeah, Caesar requires these, so render those things to them. Basically, by the way, Israel does not have their own government here. They only have their priesthood. They don't have the government anymore. They're ruled by another government. And the government that rules them now is Rome. And so what God's saying basically is, as we took care of ours, we need to take care of this one also. And of course, they're not a terror unto you unless you do evil. And so keep your nose clean and obey the laws and so forth and so on. And we were talking about, I think last week, when we were talking about for conscience sake, that a lot of things we do, not just bring wrath upon us, but we do for conscience sake. And I thought about that when I was driving in tonight, and I didn't have my seatbelt on. And I pulled out on the main highway, and I was going down, and I said, I should put my seatbelt on. You never know when you might get pulled over. Now, I wasn't worried about having a crash, or I wasn't worried about, losing my life or getting injured in an accident or anything like that. But I was worried about, getting a ticket. Maybe they'll see me or pull me over and I won't have it on. I won't even think about it, But, and then they will write me a ticket for it. So for my conscience sake, I went ahead and put my seatbelt on. And so I felt real better coming on, cleared my conscience out, didn't have to worry about it anymore. Didn't have my seatbelt on, And so I was cruising on in here like, man, I own this world, Not nowhere. They ain't write me for no seatbelt. I got mine on, you see. So you don't have to be rebellious all the time. You can put a seatbelt on. It doesn't hurt. Just for your conscience sake. So you don't have to pay that ticket. So he says, render unto Caesar those things that are Caesar's, and render unto God the things that are God. For this cause we pay tribute also, for they are God's ministers. So God calls them the servants of the government, God's ministers, attending continually upon these very things, upon this very thing, and that is government things, you see, things that the government does for us. Romans 13:7 says, render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, and honor to whom honor. So, other words, taxes to taxes is due. That's what he's telling you. And then any other customs, which are just taxes, really, other things they put on stuff, it's just a way of taxing you. It's kind of like all the stuff that we buy. You know, we have no control. I mean, we can't say, well, I don't think I need to pay that. Because if you don't, you won't get your driver's license, or you won't get your license tags, or you know, you got to pay your property tax. You got to pay all these things that they tell you got to pay, and you really have no say over it. You just go ahead and pay it the best you can and go on about your business. But God says, render to them, owe no man anything. Render to them what's due, and just do the best you can with it. In 1 Timothy 5:17, it says, let the elder that rules well to be counted of worthy of double honor, especially they that labor in the word and doctrine. So here we're switching fear to fear. Of course, we reverence God. We're supposed to fear God. That's a reverence type fear. And wherever it's due. And then honor to whom honor is due. And we should always honor those God has entrusted with our lives, even in our spiritual lives. When you address pastors, you know, address them as pastors. Address them like when we have a pastor's conference, I try to address everyone as Pastor Pomeroy or Pastor Hackathorn, you know, the preachers that preached this week. Not just because, you know, Brother Hackathorn, he's my nephew. I could have said, PJ, come on up, you know, but we need to reverence them. You know, it's Pastor Hackathorn, it's not PJ. And in the same way with Brother Tim, and I think I probably called Brother Tim a couple of times because I'm used to it, but really it's Pastor Pomeroy or Pastor Tim. That's what you should call them, because, you know, we kind of honor their position, honor who they are under God. God expects us to honor them. Now, we don't just honor them with words. We honor them with deeds. When the Bible talks about honor, it's talking about honor in a sense as an honorary. When you give someone an honorary, you honor them by an honorary. In other words, we're honored for you coming to speak to us, and at the same time, we honor you by an honorary we give to you for being here. And we want to honor you in that way. And sometimes, you know, I might have told you this, but I was at a church one night, and not only did they honor me, I wasn't speaking. I was just happened to be a pastor there. But they honored my wife. And he said, I want you to give this, he gave me an honorary to give to my wife. I want you to give this to your wife when you get home. And tell her that it was from the church, and we wanted to honor her for her duty as a pastor's wife. And I never had that happen before, and I was like, wow. And Nancy still hasn't forgot that. It was the greatest thing ever happened to her. And she, you know, so I do that now once in a while to somebody's wife. I have a missionary, I want to do something for their wife because I thought that was, I know she has a great ministry trying to keep him straight and to keep him going. And she probably works herself to death with the kids and everything in the background just so he can do what he does for God. And I know it's a great thing, and sometimes they just get neglected and overlooked. So once in a while, we'd like to honor them. And so we do, and we did when Miss Tripp was here. We honored her. We gave her an offering and said, thanks for taking care of our preacher, and you kept him good this week, and he was, you know, feisty and ready to go and all those things. And we know the hard work that goes on behind the scenes because it's very easy to not take a part. You could just stay home and, you know, just let things go and let him do whatever and chew him out when he gets back home. And you don't hear the nightmares like I hear. The nightmare stories of what goes on sometimes in these preachers' homes. And it's not always ice cream and cake. So it's good when you got someone that supports man, God's man, and does those things, so they need to be honored too. But here he says this, that they don't only honor them, but double honor them. He's worth double. So if you got here, he says, if you have an elder, and that's talking about pastors that rule well, be counted worthy of double honor, especially they that labor in the word and doctrine. So if you got one that teaches and studies and labors in that area and does the things he's supposed to do, not only is he worth his salary, but he's worth twice as much. See, I would be worth twice as much to God as I was to the secular world. I'm worth double honor. And that is, in the secular world, say I made $65,000 a year the last time that I worked as a engineer or as a machinist. And as a machinist, and I made $65,000, then as a preacher, I would have been worth twice that. So I could have made $65,000 there and $65,000 here, or I could have stepped out of there and worked here for $120,000, and it would have been not too much. It would have not been too excessive, in a church for a good pastor that labors in doctrine, that labors in doing the things of God, so forth and so on. So it's double. He's worth double the honor, and that doesn't mean a church can pay that. Because our total budget here in this church is about $50,000 a year. So that runs everything, and that pays whatever you give the pastor. That pays everything that we do, all our light bills, electric bills, and any service charges and materials we do. That's the thing. That's what covers it. And so we cannot pay someone like that, see? But we pay them the best we can. God honors that, and that's what God does. And they take care of me, and God takes care of them. And that's how it works. So it's called double honor. Double honor. In 1 Timothy 5:17, that's where it was. And 6:1, 1 Timothy 6:1, let as many servants as are under the yoke count their own masters worthy of all honor, that the name of God and his doctrine be not blasphemed. So here we're talking about servants. Now, you can be a servant if you work for somebody. You're their servant. Now, there are different kinds of servants. There are servants that are in servitude, and then there are servants that just serve as a job. When you go, to instance, to Frisch's and sit down, a servant will come up and serve you. And they'll take your order, bring your drinks, bring your food or whatever you require, or get you a napkin or silverware, whatever. But they're going to serve you while you're there. They're your servant. And here it's telling the servant that they need to honor them that are over them, their masters. And so what you do is you don't necessarily, when you're working for somebody, don't be so much concerned about how much money you can make that day, but be concerned how much I can make them. How much can I make them? What am I worth to them? What is my value to this company? So we go out and we step out there in our own willpower and with the power of God on us, of course. We want to make that guy's company as prosperous as we can because we're working for him. And God says when it rains on the just and the unjust. In other words, we might be the blessing they needed to get that company going. And so sometimes we just go out of our way or take that extra measure to make things better and be the best employee you can be, or the best servant there, and you serve your master. You don't get saved and say, I'm not working for this heathen. I'm just going to sit here and act like, you can just pay me, you know what I'm saying? I mean, after all, I have slaved in this place, but I'm born again now. I'm free. And I don't have to do this anymore. You know, a lot of times when servants, and I'm talking about slaves, when slaves got saved, they thought they should be set free. But God never said anywhere in the Bible where you set a slave free. You know, in biblical times, slavery was it was a legitimate thing. And a lot of people sold themselves into slavery to pay off debts, to feed their families, you know. It was a way God set up so you could survive. It's either that or die, you know. And so somebody, some wealthy person may say, well, I'll take care of your family. You come and serve me. And so you can serve me so many years, and when that time comes, you know, you'll have your choice whether you want to be let go, or you can choose to serve me for so many more years. And a lot of times the servant is so good, the master will actually hire them. Instead of being a slave after their time's up and the debts are paid, he hires them because he was so good for them. And a good godly slave was great for their masters. They were great for their masters. And the masters knew that. So what we got, you know, a lot of things, we don't realize it, but a lot of what slavery was in the day, and I don't, you know, we don't believe in slavery in our day and time. Nobody should be a slave to anybody. And you know, we know that. But there was a time when it was legit. And when we go back to the slavery times, we always see the films where they're out there, you know, trapping slaves like in the jungles and stuff, just like animals, and dragging them on ship. But the truth is, they were taking them out of prisons. The people who run the prison houses, the people in control would take the prisoners and sell them to the slave traders. So what we were getting is criminals. And they would bring them to these countries like Australia and America and England and France and different places, and they would sell them as slaves, and they were just common prisoners doing life anyhow. And really it was, you know, it might have been a blessing for them. And I could say that, you know, even, you know, years ago, not trying to justify slavery or anything like that, because if I would have been back there, I would have been fighting slavery back there just like I am right here. I don't think anybody should be enslaved to anybody. But it might have been a blessing in the sense that their relatives, their families, you know, when slaves became free, were born in America instead of Africa. You know what I'm saying? God may have been using it for something for good. I mean, in the long run, when it came out, things actually developed for them to a good thing, and to anybody, because, you know, a lot of our European families sold themselves into slavery for 7 years to get to America. That's how they paid their way here. And so what they would do is they would get a wealthy family to sponsor them, and then they would agree to work for that family for free, for room and board, for 7 years. And that's what they would do, and that's how our forefathers got to America. So it was a common thing, and it was legit. But he's telling us here that if you're in that situation, it says, let as many servants that are under the yoke, and that is slavery, count their own masters worthy of all honor. In other words, don't try to kill your masters. Don't be evil to them. If you get born again, don't try to run off from them. Serve your time. Do what's right. And they basically tell them to honor that agreement or whatever it may be, but be a good slave, a godly slave. And he says that the name of God and his doctrine be not blasphemed. In other words, then what would happen if all the slaves were getting born again and then cut loose, or even tried to make their masters feel guilty, or going to their masters saying, you know, God wouldn't want this, God wouldn't want you to do it, God wouldn't want, and just trying to put that guilt trip on them. Well, if that happened, you know what's going to happen. Some of them are going to feel guilty and start cutting them loose, and probably lose a lot of money, and so then they're going to hate God for everything that's going on, you know. I guess guilt will be turned toward God, like, what are you doing this to me for? I thought being born again was supposed to be a good thing. Well, it's good for that slave. And it may not even have been good for them, because I don't know how hard it would be to survive, you know, without a job, or, you know, you'd have to live off the land, I guess. You can make it, but you might have been better off with, working for someone and bread, room and board kind of thing. But I don't know. We have to wait on that one. God just says that you honor your masters. Honor them. They're worthy of all honor, he says. That the name of God and his doctrine be not blasphemed. So don't make God look bad in these kind of things. 1 Peter 2:17 says, honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. So here it gives you a whole big list. He starts out by saying, honor all men. So everybody's supposed to be honored to a certain degree. You know what it means? Like, put others before yourself. If you're sitting on a bus and there's someone standing and there's no seat for them, the Christian thing is to get up and give them your seat. That's to put them before you. That's to honor them. And especially if it's someone that's, handicapped or can't stand well or old or those kind of things, and a young guy sitting there laughing and giggling and enjoying himself, and he should be up there on his feet and letting that older person sit in that seat, who's probably in a lot of pain, their legs and back and all that kind of stuff. So that's what he's talking about. Honor all men in any way you can, in the best way you can. There's only one apple, and you reach for it and somebody else grabs it. Let them have it. You don't need to fight over that apple. And it's kind of like that in just about anything you do. And you say, well, I wanted that apple. Well, don't worry, because God's going to give you two that's so much better than that one. He always does. Every time someone leaves the church and says, you're going to be sorry, this church won't be the same without me. God sends two people to take his place every time. Every time. It doesn't do no good to get mad at God. It ain't going to help you. There'll just be two people take your place. Once you walk out the door, they'll come right in behind you. And that's the way God is. There'll be two apples for that one. That's how it works. And so God will always replace it with something better. And that's what God does. So that's why he says, honor all men. He says, love the brotherhood. So all your brothers and sisters, love them. Love them in Christ. And loving them is not just telling them you love them, but you should do that, because that's how you train yourself to love one another. Use the word. Say it once in a while. Love you, brother. Love you, sister. That thing. Now, we're not talking about romantic love. We're talking about brotherly love. Kindness, a family kind of thing. And that's the way we're supposed to love one another. And God tells you that over and over and over. And when you get used to it, then it becomes real easy to help them like you do a brother and sister. Troubles come, you get kind of connected to people like that's family. And if you think they might be struggling or something's going on, you'll step up and help them, especially if you can. You just do that. You do it automatically. Why? Because you love them. And that's how you show your love. Not through words, but through deed and truth. Deed and truth. You demonstrate your love. So he says this, honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. And that's what we do. We fear God, or reverence God with a godly fear, and we honor our king. Whatever the king wants us to do, whatever they tell us, whatever laws they make, we honor it by it. By obeying them and doing them and so forth and so on. Galatians 5:14 says, for all the law is fulfilled in one word, even this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So, God gave us a big commandment there to love your brother. Number one commandment is to love the Lord thy God with everything you got, all your faculties. Heart, soul, strength, mind. Love him with everything. And that's not to leave a stone unturned when it comes to God. God's a jealous God. He tells you that. He doesn't like you putting anything before him. So don't leave any stones unturned and say, yeah, I know I love God, but there's no buts with God, because God is not past taking that away from you. If he thinks that's your idol, if he thinks that's what keeps you from serving him, and if that's what's holding you back, he's not past moving it. So honor God with everything. And then love your brother. Number 2, the second commandment. Love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. And so if you love your neighbor as yourself, you fulfill all the laws. I mean, if you love somebody, if I love my wife, I'm not going to steal from her. If I love my wife, I'm not lying to her. If I love my wife, I'm not cheating on her. If I love my wife, I'm not doing all these things because I love her. And that's what love does. Now, there's a phony love. You can say I love them, but say, I'm doing this. And I'm in love. You're not in love, folks. You're fooling yourself. God's not fooled a minute. And there's no credit for nothing you're doing. Love is demonstrated in your deeds and in truth. And you demonstrate that love. That doesn't mean you can't make a mistake and straighten it up. You can. And you may make a mistake in your life. You may do something wrong. But you come right back. You make it up. You make it right. And you get on the right road. And you start doing things right. That's demonstrating love. And that's the way we are with one another. We demonstrate our love toward one another. And your neighbors too, by the way. You got neighbors around you probably. What your neighbors think about you? Are you out there fighting with your neighbors? They step on your property? Did their dog pee on your bush? I mean, do you get mad when that stuff happens? Don't. You know, be a good neighbor no matter what. Be a good neighbor to your neighbor. Let your neighbor know that you love them. And it's hard to do sometimes, but we're supposed to love our neighbors. My neighbor came to me the other day and he said, you know, those Mexicans you have back here painting your lawn furniture, they got paint on my truck. I said, what? He said, yeah, come over here, let me show you. And there was a little oversprays on his truck. He said, I'm going to have to get that cleaned. And I said, send me the bill. I said, I'll take care of it. I said, you go get an estimate, give me the bill, I'll have your truck cleaned. Why? I mean, I could take him to court, make him prove I put that paint on there. I could cause him a lot of trouble, or I could fix his truck and be a good neighbor. What do you think's the best to do? You want to be a good neighbor? You want to win that man? You want that man to go to hell? You want to be an evil neighbor and let him hate preachers because they're so wicked and cheap and they won't do anything. They won't take up for their pay for their debts or whatever. No, you want to be a good neighbor and you do whatever it costs and you hate it and you might bite your finger and you might struggle to come up with the money, but you got to do it because you want to be the best neighbor you can be to that guy. Who knows where that guy's going to spend eternity and who knows what effect you'll have. But so far he's never brought me a bill. He may never. He may just say because I try to be a good neighbor to him anyhow. He may just say, I can't do that to him. I'll fix it. And take care of himself. But I told him, I will pay for it. Just send me the bill. Just give me the estimate. I'll take care of it. But that's the way I felt about it. I still feel that way. But the other day I loaned him some tools and he was really happy. Really helped him, And he came over and he said, man, he said, you don't know how much that helped. He said, man, that torque wrench took them things right off in there. He's over there struggling. I don't know who put these things on here. And he didn't have a big four-way or anything. He just had a little old flimsy lug wrench about that big. And I said, hold it. I said, man, I got the tool for that. And I took him my 1,200-pound inch, or not inch, foot-pound, 1,200 foot-pound torque wrench, cordless. And man, it's like, ring, 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 ring. Man, he's like, woo, I love it. But, he's my neighbor. That's what neighbors do. And we help one another. You're supposed to love your neighbor. You're supposed to be love thyself, love your neighbor as thyself, just like you'd want them to love you the same way. Sometimes they don't know how. You'll have to be the teacher. Teaching ain't cheap sometimes, folks. Sometimes it'll cost you something to be a teacher, but it's worth it in the long run. No price on glorifying God. No price on that. You know what Solomon, when he built what they call Solomon's temple, they didn't bear any expense. What Solomon was trying to do is exalt God and glorify him to the whole world, and he made a golden temple. Everything was overlaid gold in there. This thing was just, it was talked about throughout the whole world. And everybody still looks for that Solomon's temple today because they think, if I can get to that gold, man, will we be wealthy, you know. There has to be tons of it over there somewhere. But I'm sure it's long gone. People are taking that stuff, you know, here and there. The soldiers who tore the temples and destroyed it and all that, took all that gold a long, long time ago. But we're supposed to love our neighbor. We're supposed to love him as you'd want them to love you. In Matthew 6 and verse number 18, for John had said of Herod, it's not lawful for thee to have thy brother's wife. So here we find an example where John rebukes his government. He tells the king, you're not living right. You know, there's times when the church has to go against their government. You can't lie to your government. You don't tell your government, you don't just tell them what they want to hear. Sometimes you have to tell the truth. And if they're living wrong, if they're doing something wrong, they need to know about it. A lot of times they think this is the best thing to do. I mean, I'm sure the Biden administration thinks all that wickedness is good. All that's good. They call that freedom. You know, let these people reign. They think all this is good stuff. They have, but the thing is, they have no thought of God in the picture. Remove God from the picture and then look at it. That's the way they look at it. But see, we don't look at the world that way because we know what God blesses and what God curses. And we look at it in a godly way, that if we glorify God, he'll bless us. If we're cursing him, he's going to what? Curse us. So our country will be blessed when we bless him. And that's how we bless him, through doing right and doing what he wants us to do. That's how we honor God. And our ministry as Christians is to make God look good. That's all we're supposed to do. Our whole ministry. We're going to stop right here. Titus 2:15 says, these things speak, exhort, and rebuke with all authority. Let no man despise thee. So he's told here that we're supposed to do these things. We're supposed to rebuke. We're supposed to do it with authority. And you're not supposed to let any man despise you. Let no man talk you out of it or shame you in it or any of those things. And then in 2 Timothy 4:2 it says, preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long-suffering doctrine. And God's the one that tells you to do that. And so if your government tells you, you can't preach that, you can't do that, you say, oh yes I can. Now you may not be allowed to preach it on this piece of property, or you may not allowed to be in a government building doing it, or whoever runs that can give, because that's theirs, they can tell you what to do. Or on school property, maybe they can tell you, because it's run by the government. They may be able to tell you in certain places or private property or things like that, but on public areas and public land, you have the right to speak whatever. And you preach the word. That's why you see these street preachers on the street. It's a public street. They're allowed to stand there and preach the word. They can do that. They're protected under the Constitution. That's when you can go against your government. If they tell you to do something not to do something God's already told you to do, or to do something God told you not to do, then you could say, nah, I can't do that. I'd rather serve God than man. And you take whatever punishment comes. But God will see you through it. All right, we'll stop here. Any questions or anything?